Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be back with Michelle Icard. She, as I told you before, I've told you all this. She's a speaker, an author, an educator who helps kids, parents, and teachers navigate the complicated social world of early adolescence. And this week's really exciting. Congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.
14 Talks by Age 14, the essential conversations you need to have with your kids before they start high school. So I'm going to hold up the book so everybody can see the cover. It's a great cover. It's so hard on this platform. You can see it, right?
Yes.
It's really an excellent book. I encourage everybody to get there. And I have exciting news. We have 3 copies that we're going to raffle off. So go into the comments, no, that's not what I was going to do. Email me. I'm going to put my email in the comments. So you're going to email me if you want to be entered into the raffle. It is editor@yourteenmag.com, and I will put that in the comments in a little bit. But yeah, we've got a bunch of copies, so it's exciting. And your book just came out this week. It is a book that identifies a list of topics that you think parents need to start discussing with our kids before they get to high school. So first of all, they are topics that we need to discuss, but they aren't necessarily topics that we all love discussing. So give us some of the topics just generally and maybe a little bit about why they're so hard for us.
Sure. So I tried to think about the list of topics in 2 ways. One is sort of practically speaking, what do I know that parents are worried about? And those tend to be subjects that are fear driven, right? Like, I'm worried that my kid's gonna get into drinking or drugs and get derailed. I'm worried that my child is going to send or receive a nude, and like, I can't possibly figure out how to handle or react to that. Or they're just going into middle school, and what if they stumble on pornography? How would I possibly talk about that? So some are really like fear driven in that way. And those are not the broader topics that I suggest parents talk about in the book. They are in the book. I tell you how to talk about them, but they're kind of under easier themes to broach these subjects with. So for example, some of those are in the chapter on taking care of yourself. So it's an easier way to kind of segue into, and here are some ways that, you can get derailed from taking care of yourself. And then some of the topics are, I think, lighter in the sense that they're easier to talk about, but super important and often overlooked. And that's things like creativity. Creativity, we spend so much time nurturing it when our kids are little. And then when they get into the tween and early teen years, we think, oh, where has that gone? All they want to do is stare at screens, right? Or themselves in a mirror. So some of them are lighter like that. There's independence, there's fairness, this concept of, it can come up in sibling relationships. It can come up in the news and looking at what's happening in our country. So there are 14 of those.
Okay, so you came up with a model.
Yeah.
And like literally a paradigm to put our problems into and like come out with solutions. And so what we're going to do this morning, we talked about, picking one of the 14 topics and working it through your model. So first of all, I want to say the topic is lying, and lying, it elicits for many of us rage. Like, there's some sense that we are raising horrible human beings if they would lie, despite the fact that, as we're going to learn from you, everybody lies in some way or another. So let's start with the model and then move into how would you run through a scenario involving lying and put it through your wonderful paradigm.
Great. Okay. So the model is called BRIEF. And it's an acronym, and I chose it purposefully because I like that it's spelled brief, because I don't want parents to feel like these conversations are overwhelming or massive or need to be perfect. They can be, you get in and out 5 or 6 times on the same topic, and it's a quick little touch point for you and your child. But I'll tell you what each letter stands for, and that this is a universal approach. So no matter what you're talking about, this is a way to frame the conversation so that your child doesn't just like roll their eyes or just get stone-faced and not respond when you begin. So brief, the first letter is B, and that stands for begin peacefully. And the reason I highlight this in the approach is that So many parents are scared to talk about these tough topics. And so what they end up doing is barreling in because they know they might have only 10 or 20 seconds until their kid is like, I'm done, gross, I'm not talking about this with you. So that doesn't work. So begin peacefully can be like scheduling a time to talk. It can be coming in sort of tangentially from the side. And I'll give you an example of that when we get there. R is relate to your child. And so right off the bat, you just want to show that you're not there to catch them doing something wrong. This isn't an interrogation. You're on the same team and relating to them in some way, having empathy or understanding right off the bat will soften your child a little bit. I is interview. An interview for data is how I put it in the book because I do want it to sound unemotional and kind of clinical. Here's your opportunity to ask some questions to see if your child understands the concept that you're talking about in the same way that you do. And often parents and kids are speaking a different language at this age. And I mean that sort of metaphorically, but also quite literally. We may think a word means something and our kid may think it means something else. So it's important to kind of fact check along the way. E is echo what you hear. And that's like, anybody who's been to a therapist or seen one on TV knows what that means. That's where you say like, oh, it sounds like you're saying, or it seems to me that you're feeling. So you're just, again, you're kind of checking to make sure that your comprehension is right. And then F is the final step, and that's feedback. And that is, unfortunately, where most of us begin these conversations because we think we have that tiny little window. So F is where you get to give a suggestion, advice, set boundaries, limits, all that stuff. But your child isn't interested in hearing that until you've sort of earned their trust in the process. And that's why there's this ramping up in brief.
Okay, so now let's walk us through. And what I love most about what we're going to talk about is not what you shouldn't do, but what you can do. Because oftentimes people are identifying the negative of what we're doing wrong instead of like, okay, so now what should we do? We know what not to do, but we don't know what to do. So when we talk about lying, we're going to kind of weave it into this whole paradigm.
Yeah. So lying, as you said, it really freaks parents out. They think it's a massive character flaw, that their child is going to be a sociopath. It's such a value in our family. Why would my kid lie to me? So just to reassure everyone, as you did a little bit, totally normal. Kids are really experimenting at this age. Their brains, and I'm at this age, is like starting at around age 11, going through adolescence. So all the way through high school. Their minds are making a big shift from concrete thinking to hypothetical thinking. And so they're really working in gray areas. And what used to be really concrete, tattletale, black and white, I'm on the side of truth, in tweens and teens can turn into like, I can sort of stretch this here a little bit. And that's very natural, but it's frustrating for parents. So let's look at a really common scenario, which would be your kid is either flat out lying to you or just not being forthcoming about their grades. And I have parents say this all the time, like, whoa, I've just discovered my kid hasn't turned in any assignments. And I've asked them all semester long, how's it going? Are you keeping up with your schoolwork? And the kid's like, yeah, it's fine. Everything's good. I've got it under control. Don't worry about it. So let's say that you discover something like this happened. You're going to begin peacefully. And I think our impulse in this situation would be to be like, oh my gosh, I just saw your grades. What the heck? You've been lying to me this whole time. So instead of that, you might, as I said, schedule a time to talk, which is helpful. So you could say, hey, I just noticed your grades aren't what I expected. And you're going to be very kind of neutral about this, because if you're making an angry face, your kid's going to stop listening right away. So you say, hey, your grades aren't what I expected. I'm curious about this. Having a sort of curiosity is another good tip for a way to start. I'm curious about how this happened. I'd like to talk with you about it. Do you want to talk before dinner or after dinner? You pick. Give them a little bit of like power, tiny bit of power in the beginning. It depends on the kid. I don't know if the kid's going to jump on like, oh no, I'm terrified. Let's do it right now. Or we'll talk about it later so I can build my case. Whatever it is, then you're going to come back together, let's say, for R, and that's relate. And that's where you can say something simple like, look, this is hard. I know you probably have a lot of emotions right now. This is unexpected for both of us. We're going to figure out what to do, but we kind of need to get to the bottom of this, right? I is where you interview. So here you can ask questions, and the questions are not like, what were you thinking? Why are you a lying liar? It's like, you really want to get to what happened here. So you might ask questions like, what were you aware that your grades were slipping? How are you trying to handle this? Or were you thinking if you ignored it, it might go away? What did you think would happen when I found out? Did you think ahead to whether I would find out? It's it's a chance for you to get information. It's also a chance to really talk the kid through the thought process here. Like, they're very impulsive thinkers. So give them some cues here for what they could be doing next time. E is echo what you hear. So here you're kind of playing the role of therapist. So you might say something like, okay, it sounds like you think that this was the teacher's fault. That's probably a common scapegoat. Sounds like you think the teacher did not do a good job of assigning the work, or you turned it in and they didn't record it, or you didn't understand. So you're going to just echo back whatever excuses your kid came to you with. And then F is where you're going to give feedback. So at this point, I think if you've had this approach, your kid has built a little bit of trust that you're not here to be the cop. You're not here to be the moral police to say, you're a horrible human for having lied about this. You're here to help. The goal is for them to learn how to not do this again. So your feedback might sound, if you're feeling gentle, if this is a first-time offense, it might sound like, I appreciate you wanting to handle this yourself. Let's talk about what you can do next time. And if this happens again next time, I think we need to have a clear consequence in place. So let's talk about that right now, what that's going to look like. If you're feeling like, man, this happens all the time and I need to be more firm, this is not a time for being gentle, then you might just say something like, okay, well, so here we are. You've got a bunch of zeros, you're looking at a bunch of Fs in class, and this is not good. So we are going to have to really buckle down. And if we had dealt with this sooner, you would probably have been able to just make up some assignments and move on. But now we're in a more dire place. So it's going to be no going out on the weekends or no playing video games or whatever your consequence is until these things happen. And then you set some actionable goals. So that's brief, kind of on the concept of lying. And it works much better than charging in with an accusation and sort of being the morality cop.
So what happens if the kid continues with the lie?
Right. So what would that sound like, Sue? Like,
no, I've given those assignments and they just haven't been put in yet.
Okay, that's great. So that might be true, might not be true, right? I think in that case, I would say something like, okay, well then, let's have a 24-hour grace period. You email the teacher, say, show me the email. Let's just like prove this out a little bit. Like, why don't you email the teacher and have the teacher confirm that for me? And if that's the case, amazing. And I'm so proud of you for advocating for yourself. And if it's not the case, then we have the same problem. We'll circle back and we'll figure out how to solve it, But I would put the onus on the kid.
Your voice is so soothing. I'm soothed by it.
You're not in trouble, Sue. Don't worry.
I want to just take a second to talk about the consequence.
Yeah.
So if you have an angry kid or a frustrated kid and you take away the thing that gives them joy, especially right now, like, what should we worry about when we're coming up with the consequence? And should we involve the kid in that decision?
It's a great question. I always believe in tying the consequence to what you want the kid to learn. So like, I know that a lot of parents will default to, and I used in the example, like taking away screens, for example. That's only relevant if screens are the reason your kid wasn't turning in their homework. But if screens are not the reason, then it's sort of pointless to be like, here's something you love, and I'm depriving you of a thing that you love and that brings you joy strictly as a punishment. That doesn't teach the kid anything. So it may be that the better approach, and you'll have to decide, listeners will decide based on what their kid values and what they really think is at the core of the kid not doing the work, because maybe what's at the core of the kid not doing the work is a learning difference, right? Or maybe it's complete lethargy over online school right now. So it may be that a consequence is needed, or it may be that an incentive is needed, right? This is why having the conversation instead of just being like, you are such a liar, don't do this, is so important, because it allows you to kind of drill down to find out what the issue is. And if your child hears you accusing them and then clams up, you can't get the information you need to really solve it. I mean, you're being a detective in a way. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because it is essential to kind of figure out what's at the root of this. The lying is symptomatic of a bigger issue here. And what is that? Is my kid not understanding the material? Is my kid bored out of their mind? Does my kid not understand things that are auditory? Do they need to see them written down? Whatever that may be, but you've got to do some investigating.
It's such a team effort then, instead of being you bad person.
Yes. It's not you're the bad guy, I'm the cop. It's like, hey, together we have a mystery to solve here. Something went off the rails, and let's work as a team and figure it out, because I'm far more interested in helping you be successful than in teaching you to feel bad about this.
Okay, so we did, going through brief seems like something we can do as parents over and over again. And the idea of even just making sure it's brief just feels like such a shift in how we generally approach our kids. So, and you talk about some of these things, some of these obstacles, and to having a meaningful conversation where we kind of sabotage ourselves. So can you just give us a few, and then also, since we don't want to leave people with the what not to do, tell us the better way.
Yes, I'd love to. Okay. And I will tell you that I know these in part because I've done these. Like, these are, if you hear your voice here when I'm telling you about these things that kids don't like, you are not alone. Most of us default to this mode of communication, especially when we're talking to tweens and teens, because it's frustrating. But some of the things that don't work are, and this is a tough one for me, being passive aggressive. I find myself getting to a point when I'm talking with my kids, when my kids were this age, they're older now, where I would just be like, fine, whatever then. Don't try hard. It's okay with me if you don't go to college. I would default to that. Clearly we know, like you know, when you hear me do that it's not going to be effective. It feels satisfying in the moment, but then later I'd always be like, what have I done? Like, that is not helpful to anyone. So if you can be aware of that and just kind of catch it before it happens, it never causes your child to be like, oh, dang, you're right. It just makes them mad. So that's not a good one. Another one that kids really hate is when you assume how they feel or how they're going to feel. Kids in early adolescence are really working hard to individuate themselves, to become their own person away from their parents, and to be sort of thoughtful about who they are and what they think and how they feel. And so when parents say things like, well, you're going to regret that later. I'm just here to tell you, I've lived a long life. I have experience. You are going to regret it if you don't apply yourself right now. And I get that. I get the impulse, and they might regret it. But to be told how you're going to feel later down the road, I mean, my inner 13-year-old would have been like, oh, no, I will not. And I will dig my heels in and prove to you that I will not regret it. I will get such bad grades, So try not to just assume how your kid feels. Those are two of my biggies for conversation crashers. And then things that work really well. Kids like, at this age especially, and I think all humans, like to feel as though you value their opinion, like they have thoughts that are interesting and worthwhile. So asking them questions is great, and not yes or no questions, and not how was your day questions, but like, what do you think is the best solution here? How do you think we can handle this in a way that's going to serve you best? Or what strengths do you have that you think you can use here? Because you've done well before in situations that are challenging. Let's think of one. What's a time when that was really hard for you and you pushed through and you did well? How can you carry that over here? So it's about kind of giving your kid a little bit of the little hold on the steering wheel and being able to feel like they have some say in what's happening.
And you offer so many of those questions in your book. They're really wonderful prompts and things that like for me, I just wouldn't have thought to approach a kid coming home from school with some of those, like, how would you solve even a political problem that you read about that day or something like that? They're wonderful questions. So if this all sounds appealing to you, we've got a few copies of the book to raffle off. Make sure to email me. I put my email in the chat. We have a few comments from people. Most of them are relating successes. So Stephanie asked her kid, was he struggling in school? And he said yes. And then she asked, is it confusing and is it hard? And he said, yeah. So she just knew intuitively to do what you're suggesting. And so she'll hopefully be able to get to the core of the problem with that information.
That's right.
And Lori's having the same talk about school every 9 weeks. And it seems to be surprising every time. Yeah. So, and she appreciates your tips. And then Christina says, oh, this is an example of a question, like, help me understand, is there anything I can do to help you with it? So that's lovely. I always love that.
I do too. Help me understand. It's not, I know everything.
Yeah.
You're the expert on you, kiddo. So like, you help me, teach me a little bit here.
Okay. So what's the big takeaway that you want parents to leave when they're done hearing you today and done reading the book? What's the big takeaway?
I think the big takeaway is that these conversations aren't about having the right answer. They are not about you being perfect or you knowing what to say when it's a tough topic. They're about you building a rapport with your kid. I always say that your job as a parent of a teenager is to figure out how to keep the door open when the door keeps wanting to shut. I mean, certainly your kid needs privacy and independence and all of that, but you want them to know they are never in a position that they can't come to you if they really need help, right? That's what every parent wants. So, these conversations and learning how to talk this way is really about building that communication bridge so your kid knows you're a safe person to come to.
Michelle Icard, thank you so much. Thank you for being here again. I'm going to hold up the book again. Great book. Everybody should buy it. And if you want to take a chance with us, send me an email and we'll enter you into the raffle for some free copies. And let me say the name again, 14 Talks by Age 14, the essential conversations you need to have with your kids before they start high school. There it is.
Yes. Thank you, Sue. I always love talking to you.
You too. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye.